Hello and welcome to the FarmHouse. I'm Stephanie Spiker.
And I'm Candace Wierzbowski.
And this week, I got a chance to talk to Linley Dixon, who is an organic vegetable farmer in Colorado. And on top of farming, Linley also helped create the Real Organic Project, which is an organic certification label that farmers can add on to their USDA certification.
Well, wait a minute. What's wrong with just the USDA certification? How is Real Organic different?
So basically, Linley and some of the other organic farmers that were certified organic through USDA just didn't quite feel like the certification they got through the USDA was enough to explain their organic practices. So they decided to create their own label that just goes a little more in depth of what they're doing about their organic growing practices.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so let's learn more about the Real Organic Project from Linley Dixon. Linley, thank you so much for joining me in the FarmHouse.
Excited to be here. It's going to be good to get to know you, Stephanie.
So I would love to know, what exactly is the Real Organic Project for people who maybe have not heard of it? And how is that label different than the one that people might be more familiar with, which is the USDA certified organic one?
So the Real Organic Project is a very grassroots effort, much like organic was to start with, way before the USDA got involved, but an effort to communicate farmers' products directly to eaters. And that was the whole goal of the USDA organic label, so that, customers and farmers could find each other in the retail grocery store space. And with the ever increasing consolidation in organic and actually changing of some of the rules for what we thought organic farming was, many farmers who started the movement felt like the USDA organic seal was no longer reflecting the way that they farmed. They were getting pushed off the shelves, and it started as sort of a rallying cry to make sure that soil health was still fundamental to what could be certified as organic. And as soon as farmers started to show up to the USDA meetings to make sure that that was represented, they found out that there were more and more problems than they realized. And it really was in every sector, dairy, eggs, poultry, beef, everything had issues. And so after losing a pivotal vote to make sure that soil health was part of organic, the farmers got back together as they used to in the old days when they were, deciding what organic was and really building the standards on a regional level. And they said, what do we do? They kind of thought the USDA had this and that they could really just focus on their farms again. Organic used to be a very regional, let's get together, farmer-led standards and decide where can we push the bar and work on continuous improvement every year to make sure that organic evolves and continues to get better and better. And when the USDA got involved, I think those meetings sort of stopped happening. They thought, okay, we've got this covered. We've got great language in the law to really represent what we wanted. And I think it took them, maybe 10, 15 years. It's sort of depending on the food product, the sector, for them to wake up and just realize, oh my gosh, we've got a problem here. So the farmers got together and they agreed to do a new label. And it was pretty split over whether or not it would be a standalone label where they would abandon our USDA organic completely, or whether it would be an add-on seal. And because of very limited resources, basically nothing at the time, they chose to do an add-on seal so that, the USDA still has a very rigorous inspection program. And at least we could build off of that and not have to worry about doing all of that initial inspection ourselves. So that's where we are today. We've got about 1,000 farms across the country, and our label is in use now in the grocery stores. I don't know if you've seen it, but for sure it's present at a lot of farmers markets, and, very grassroots farms are involved, but we also have some larger farms that are sticking true to the standards, like Lady Moon on the East Coast. You've probably seen that in Wegmans and Whole Foods and other larger stores. So it's not necessarily about scale, although a lot of small farms are involved, but there are some large farms that really are incredible cover croppers and have additional standards to, we have additional worker welfare standards so that can meet all these additional add-on criteria. So really farms of all types and scales are involved, and it's pretty exciting to see us all come together again and get that kind of grassroots movement back into organic.
Wow. Yeah, that's very interesting. And I do think we definitely have a lot of farmers that listen to this podcast. So For anyone who's listening, who's a farmer who is now thinking, okay, I kind of want to get that label, what is the process of the certification? And then, what are the kind of extra benefits of having that extra label?
Yeah, being farmer-led, it was very important to us that the burden of another label didn't fall on the farmers. It really felt like it wasn't our fault that the USDA had gone astray.
Yeah.
So it's free. Of course, you do need that USDA certificate first. And just to all the farmers that are out there that don't have USDA organic yet, it might be something that you look towards as your farm grows. For me, that was certainly the case. It took 8 years for me to even acquire farmland. And there was no way I was thinking about getting certified organic, even though I was using organic practices during that time. So as your farm evolves, I really specialized in a few crops, and tomatoes, I was getting on the wholesale shelves and selling wholesale. And that's when I realized, I don't know my customer anymore. This USDA organic thing will help me get into natural grocers, will help me get into some of the markets that are requiring that. So then I looked towards certification. So I guess I'm trying to say this movement is for everyone, even if you're not a farmer, because a lot of times you're looking for things in the grocery store that you're finding at your farmer's market, and you'd like to be able to get it more than once a week, and you'd like to be able to get it at your natural grocery store. So I think eaters are excited about this opportunity to create more market space for the farmers that they really care about in their local region that really were getting pushed off the shelves and not finding a home for their produce. It was incredible to me to hear that. I mean, Stephanie, some farmers that are just, I'd looked up to my whole career who had founded organic, just lived and breathed, this movement, were struggling, and they were losing sales. And it really shows that the consolidation that was happening at every level, at distribution, of course, in the grocery stores, we've seen the mergers, and everybody's competing with Walmart ultimately, but that it was really getting worse and worse. And, what for a long time allowed some of these smaller kind of mid-scale farms to thrive, that market was going away. So it just really expressed a need. And of course, we have all this regret that we didn't start it from the beginning, right? That it's like, It feels like it's coming too late. But I think it's really important for the next generation of farmers to hear that, or, even I just saw organic as, that's not me. That's too corporate now. There's so many barriers to jump through for me to even get certified. I can't, pay the initial fee. Cost share is something that does come back from the government to help get certified. But there was a gap there. And as a small farmer, I had to pay the fees up front, and I wasn't going to get that reimbursement till the fall. And you never knew if it was fully going to come in. So there were all these hurdles kind of to get small farmers started. I could go on and on, but it seems like this movement really was needed. It's always going to be needed as a check on the corporate consolidation. And my hope is that the farmers who are young and don't really know the origin story of organic, that they can see that it really is this kind of beautiful grassroots movement, always was, and that it's still alive, that we just need to come together and get organized once again.
Yeah. So I was looking at, your website a lot before our chat today. And one of the things that stood out to me, just because I did not grow up farming, I do not farm right now, and I feel like I have a fairly basic understanding of organics. So the thing that stood out to me the most was how often you highlight about being grown in soil. So can you explain a little why growing hydroponically should not be considered organic? Because that's something that I had actually never heard before. So I'm really interested to learn about that.
Yeah, I think it's not obvious, maybe like having animals on pasture is. To me, it's the equivalent in crop production of a CAFO versus, a pasture-based operation, but for crops. And the reason why I say that is, when you have a pasture-based operation, you are growing your fertility right on site. It's just a completely different way of producing, right? And there should be a value added in the marketplace for the farmers that are doing that. Much like that in hydroponic, it's basically all of the fertility is bought off the farm, and you're just giving that liquid feed, that liquid fertilizer to the plant. And all of that effort that farmers do into creating soil health, cover cropping, slow release compost, slow release fertility across the season, even the act of growing hedgerows and bringing in beneficials, all of those benefits just aren't part of a hydroponic operation. And so we really felt like maybe even that wasn't obvious to the consumer, but we really felt like we were offering a different product, much like a pasture-based. And I think there's even research into nutrition where it's showing that, pasture-based meat and eggs and dairy have higher beneficial omega-3s and, in the product. I believe that's true of soil-grown crops. We just don't have the research yet. Who's funding that research, right? And nutrition really is complicated. So I'm not sure that we know yet what even to measure. But it was a way to just kind of show that there are all these sustainability benefits and extra efforts that farmers go through to maintain soil health in a very sustainable way without the use of fertilizers that is always part of organic production. The synthetic highly available high nitrogen fertilizers are not really meant to be part of organic. And that started to slip in, right? It's kind of like this, well, we need it for our plant starts, our transplants, right? And it's a one-time, we need to fertilize our transplants with some fish emulsion before we transplant them out into the field where we've incorporated a cover crop for slow release fertility. That's what fish fertilizer on the national list of approved substances in organic, that's what it was used for. And somehow the industry saw that and thought, great, let's build an entire system around using that fertility throughout the entire life of the crop. And that started to slip in, right? So I think there were all of these unintended consequences, things that farmers didn't realize that the industry found a loophole for.
I mean, hydroponics is kind of a newer thing that's been up and coming and talked about. And it's just, I never considered it in terms of the soil and the organic portion of it. So that's so interesting. As you mentioned, you have over 1,000 farms that have the Real Organic Project certification. And I was looking at your website, and it seems like they're pretty spread out all across the U.S. So since the label kind of officially launched and this effort started, how quickly has farm participation grown? And do you see that interest among farmers continuing to grow?
So we've got about 1,000 farms, and it was really exciting at the beginning to see that there were farmers all across the country that were excited about the movement. I had the privilege of getting to go visit all of these farms and do the initial inspections and movement building. And I just couldn't believe that there were farmers willing to sign up for another certification because, frankly, we don't love being inspected. We don't love having to check all the boxes and keep all the paperwork. So this was clearly a principle values-based movement. And I was so surprised to see how many farmers were in from the beginning. But what's been really surprising to me is that over time, I mean, we're 7 years old now, that we've had farmers that grow commodities that are pooled and can't use the seal at all. So essentially, if you sell to a mill, your product is pooled with many other grain growers, for example. And so there's really no way to get that real organic seal towards the end eater. And there are a lot of these farmers that are signing up for the program because it's so obvious to them that soil health is integral to organic. So it's only a principles-based sort of activist decision to be involved in this movement to protect the integrity of organic. Not just, I need to do this for my farm so that I can get higher sales. I hope that's the end goal of this, that we actually are increasing sales and a price point that works for these farmers that are really stewards of the land and doing so much more. But we're not at that point yet, and I've been so excited to see the movement growing. I mean, we have 150 new farms this season that have signed up.
Oh, wow.
And 6 inspectors across the country that are out, to check to make sure they meet our higher standards for worker welfare, soil health, and livestock production, pasture-based organic. So it's exciting to see it continue to grow.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we're going to pivot a tiny bit because in addition to your work with the Real Organic Project, you yourself are a farmer. You grow vegetables in Colorado. So can you tell us a little bit more about your farm, how you got started, and what your farm is like today?
That is quite a story. I don't know how long you'd like me to tell. Like I said earlier, it took us 8 years to find land. So that was the first barrier. I'm from actually the Mid-Atlantic. I learned how to farm in Maryland and would spend my summers up in Maine working on CSA farms. So I'm much more familiar with the farming in the East. I met my husband who farms with me and my brother out here in Colorado. We met in college in Colorado, and we knew that we loved the mountains. So finding a small town where we felt like we could actually sell our product was the first challenge. So we kind of have a long journey of farm access. We had an incredible rental right in the middle of town for our CSA. And we were there for the first 4 years of the operation and kind of had a small journey of like, at one point we were growing on 4 different lots in order to make it all work. And that's where we were about 8 years in when we decided we just were going to quit because we realized that water access is a huge thing out here for farming. We needed irrigation water rights, and land close to our markets was just basically unobtainable. So we have a young daughter that we had her at the same time that we started the farm, and we wanted to stay close to town for her, at least during her school years. So we had decided to quit. And sort of word spread throughout the community that we didn't have land and we weren't going to keep farming. And that social capital of kind of farming in town and everybody knowing us kicked in. So word spread, and we got a knock on our door saying, look, we got this piece of land in foreclosure and we'd love to see farmers on it.
Oh, wow.
So we actually feel so grateful. We're right outside the town of Durango, Colorado, the southwest portion of the state, right in the mountains, really close to a ski resort called Purgatory. And we have water rights in beautiful kind of actual farmland, which I don't know, coming from the East, it's like everything is farmland. But out here where water is scarce, it's very clear that where healthy soils are, where water is very limited. And we just feel so grateful to be on that. Mostly it becomes developments with ponds or horse properties. So we feel so grateful to be part of that. Over time, we have specialized in the crops that we could grow well on this plot. And it's so funny, when we switched plots, we were really good at farming all the brassicas. So we'd have the purple cauliflowers, bigger than 3 times the size of our heads, we hold them up. And so that's what grew well on one of our older plots. But then the soil type where we're farming now is a little bit heavier, a little bit darker, so it's a lot less sandy. And we grow cucumbers, salad greens, tomatoes, basil herbs. These are the things, peas, that we've decided we're really good at growing these things here. And we've sort of specialized in them. We weren't able to have an on-farm pickup at this location. You kind of drive in front of some other houses on a dirt road, and it was just not going to happen to have so many people come to the farm. And I really miss that. I wish it was still part of it. But yeah, I would say we are specializing in about 10 crops. Ironically, the crops that are very profitable for us are all available hydroponically from out of the country where they're paying $1 an hour. So we're still competing with $1.50, $2 pints of cherry tomatoes coming in. And it's just like half of what we're, offering wholesale here. And, so it's a little painful to see what we're competing against, but we have a product that they're willing to pay for it because it tastes so good. So, we're still growing the cherry tomatoes, like the Sun Golds and things like that just everybody wants, that are so much more delicious than the high yielding varieties that have incredible shelf life. So anyway, there are a few independent grocery stores that are still willing to work with us where the consolidation hasn't hit so hard. It's incredible how many, with Whole Foods being bought by Amazon, a lot of those relationships with the buyers have just gone away. So you have to work through global, and you have to have year-long, product. You can't offer something for 3 months of the year and then disappear, which is what the local food system requires to sell wholesale. And we're fortunate that there are still a few grocery stores in our community willing to work with us. There's 3, actually. So we feel like we have great market opportunities here, and a very supportive community that, in the end, when we said, look, it's not going to work for us, they came together and made it happen. So we're just incredibly grateful that we're able to continue to farm here.
Yeah, what a cool story. That's, I feel like we've been doing this podcast over a year and a half at this point, and I feel like I've heard a lot of very cool and unique stories, and this is definitely a first of having a community really fight for you to keep farming. So what a cool story.
Yeah, I'd say there's something to that social capital that you build for working really hard for a number of years in a community. I don't think they would have done it if we were new, but I think they saw that the work ethic was there and we had built those relationships. So there's something to just putting out in a community what you need, and you never know, right?
Yeah. So, you talked about your wholesale. So do you still sell at farmers markets?
We do. Yep. We still go to the farmers market. We sell at James Ranch, an incredible pasture-based farmers market stand and restaurant. And we have a very touristy community in the summer that everybody drives through and eats at James Ranch. And we sell a lot of tomatoes to them at their farm stand. But we don't have the CSA anymore. For a while, we had a farmer cooperative that we sold through. They had grant money for maybe 8 years it ran. And when that federal funding went away, we lost that. So we don't have any regional distribution, cooperative distribution, but there are a number of restaurants that, we can still work with the chefs one-on-one and deliver directly.
Nice.
So those are our markets.
At the farmers market, are you able to have conversations with consumers about the Real Organic Project label? Has anyone ever asked about it?
Yeah. Pretty much once a market, we get asked, are you certified organic? And of course, we don't have the USDA organic seal up there because we're mad at them. Like we're not proud of that. But we have our Real Organic Project seal up there. And so we'll point to that and we'll say, yes, we're certified organic and we're also part of the Real Organic Project. And we'll give our one-liner. I mean, the farmers market is not the time to have a long conversation about, the industrial takeover and the whole story. So what we do is we just say, yes, we're certified organic and we're part of the Real Organic Project. Look it up, check it out, and so, because if you Google Real Organic, you'll find it on the website.
So as you mentioned before, farmers who do want to get that additional label, they don't have to pay for it. So how is the project funded? And then how do you get the word out to the general public to kind of help with donations or help with this project?
So one of the most important things was that it was free. And we had originally thought, okay, let's just make every farm pay $100. That should be able to cover, because we only visit the farms once every 5 years. Mm-hmm. So over 5 years, the $500 should be able to cover another farm visit. So we had this all worked out. And then I was like, you know what? I really don't think we're going to get the tiny farms. And I want the tiny farms to be part of this movement. Even if we charge $100, I don't think we're going to get them. So I was the one that was kind of like, we've got to make it free if we really want this movement to have an impact. And that created a challenge. So now we've got to speak to eaters. And so we have a weekly newsletter. We have a podcast ourselves called the Real Organic Podcast. And for that, we interview a lot of farmers, but we also interview some, I think, people that eaters would be really excited about. So, we had Al Gore on the podcast,
oh, wow.
Dan Barber, Marion Nessel is a recent one. Just people that have really created a splash in the food system. And we have these really intellectual, in-depth conversations. My co-director, Dave Chapman, does most of them. But, I'm starting to pepper in there and do a lot more. And the goal is to really dive deep into these issues of consolidation and what's happening to the farmers. And I think there's a lot of eaters, in addition to farmers, that are listening. And so we depend entirely. There's no federal funds coming to say, yeah, we'll support this, because, of course, the USDA doesn't like us very much. Our whole name, Real Organic, is implying that they are certifying things that are not real organic. Right. So we don't have any federal funds that are supporting this, but we fortunately have a lot of independent eaters, either that have family foundations, or we have this program called Real Friends, where you can donate $100 a year, and that supports all of our educational outreach. And we do a virtual symposium and a lot of things that they can get free tickets to if they're part of that program. So far it's working for the eaters to help support this. And of course, we have some farms that support us as well.
Nice. So what does being a woman in agriculture mean to you?
I'm really proud that a lot of female farmers are organic. I think that it's a much higher percentage. So of the women farmers, they are a much higher percentage organic farmers. And it was just so obvious to me that if I were to farm, there was no way I was going to do it any other way but organically. And I guess I'm proud of that. I'm also proud of the diversification. I don't know if that's similar to organic, but I just feel like a diversified farm met my personality so well. I didn't want those, 100 rows of the same thing. So I don't know. Maybe I'm leaping too far that these are traits that a woman would have, but
no,
I feel
it's individual. And if that's where,
for sure,
where you're feeling, I think that's very valid for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we're less competitive in general. Obviously, these are huge generalizations. So we have a network that the men have never, regionally here, the men have never done anything like this, where we get together and we share, and we actually, this was pre-COVID. We haven't done it since then, but we'd rent an Airbnb and we'd all come together and share our farm stories. And so I guess that energy, my brother who I farm with is very much like this. So obviously these are generalizations, but I wish that we could have more of this in agriculture in general, more sharing, less competition. How can we work together? The rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah.
These are things that I really believe in, that when we come to, we don't farm in isolation. So when we come together, we can have a much bigger impact on policy, for example, and we need that to go our way. We're going to lose if we don't have political reform. So I guess I love that spirit of everybody's in this together. And for what that's worth, I know a lot of men have that too. But I feel like there are a lot of women leaders in this space.
Nice. Yeah.
And I'm proud to be one of them and look up to so many of them that have sort of guided me along the way.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you so much for taking the time and joining me here at the farmhouse. It was so great to get to know more about the Real Organic Project.
Thanks, Stephanie.
I feel like I learned a lot about Linley, and I feel like the conversation of labels, certifications, it's come up a few times before on this podcast, and it kind of becomes this whole argument of like sticker or no sticker. Do you get certified? I know it's shorthand at markets. It means, that your food has been grown a certain way and that customers or eaters, as she kept saying, which I thought was interesting. I've never heard that label used before like that. It lets them know what they can expect. But of course, like she said, a lot of farmers aren't really into, the whole process of getting certified. There's a pain point there, whether it's price or it's just a pain in the neck to have someone come out.
Yeah.
And it takes time away from farming. On the other hand, we've also heard farmers say that they like the fact that not having a label, forces interaction with their customers. So, yeah, it's a really interesting conundrum, I think, for farmers.
Yeah, and it was interesting to me, I had to laugh when she said basically that farmers don't often like certifications and processes of being certified, which, like you said, we've talked to a lot of farmers who say basically, yeah, we use organic practices, we're just not certified. So it's interesting that over 1,000 farmers throughout the U.S. have pretty much actively chosen to do one more step of certification.
Right.
Especially farmers who maybe that label isn't even showing up on the product the consumers are buying, like in the example she gave of the grain farmers. So clearly farmers believe in this movement if they're willing to do this extra certification, which is, it's cool to see. I enjoyed all of her talk about community and how you don't have to farm in isolation because, we hear all the time that farming is so isolating. So to have a movement of people who all kind of believe in this practice of organic. Yeah. It's a nice little community they've built.
It was kind of like a theme throughout the whole conversation you had, because talk about the power of community. When she and her partner thought that they were going to stop farming because they didn't have land, and their community kind of rallied around them to find them land. That's an incredible story. And now, there's this other community that has come together because they weren't satisfied with what the USDA was doing, and as a community, they figured out this Real Organic certification.
Yeah. Honestly, Linley's story about the community helping them find land to continue farming is maybe one of my favorite stories that has come out of this podcast. That was such a unique one and such a cool experience that, their community cared so much and loved their product so much to help them keep going. Very cool. Well, that's going to wrap us up here today. So thank you so much for listening. If you liked this episode, please consider subscribing if you haven't already done so. And if you really liked the episode, please consider leaving us a review.
If you have any questions or thoughts about this episode, you can email us at farmhouse@lancasterfarming.com.
You can also find us on social media at Lancaster Farming on most platforms.
Thank you again for listening and for visiting the farmhouse. I'm Candace.
And I'm Stephanie.
And we'll talk to you later.
Bye. This episode of The Farmhouse is copyright 2025 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, part of the Steinman Communications family.
It was written by Stephanie Spiker and Candice Worzbowski. It was produced by Eric Herlock and Justin Berger. The music is by Tin Bird Shadow.